Hello, my name is Natalie Martinez, and this is my Showcase 2 assignment. So, the lesson plan that we're going to be looking at today is for second grade, and the objective is for the students to be able to tell time off standard or analog clocks. So, the way this lesson plan is set up is they have a choice board. There are 9 choices of activities they can do with links, except for the worksheet, which is just later in the slides. And they can go to these links and practice or assess their knowledge of telling time with analog clocks. So the first one we're going to look at is the mathgames.com link, which is their first choice. So mathgames.com, it looks something like this. Students are given a clock and then they just put in the answer. If they get the answer correct, their screen will look something like this right over here. However, if they get the answer incorrect, it goes into this sort of pattern. So the first thing it'll do is it'll ask them to try again, but instead of having them type in the answer, they have buttons to choose from. Gosh darn it. Hello, my name is Natalie Martinez, and this is my Showcase 2 assignment for Educational Technology. So the lesson plan we'll be looking at today is centered towards second grade students, and the objective is for them to be able to tell time using standard or analog clocks. And the way they get to do that is they're given this choice board. There are 9 choices on here, and they can choose any activity from any block on the board. Most of them have links, all except the worksheet, because that's just added in later in the presentation. But they can go to each of these links and practice. Some of them are more explanatory than others. Some of them are more assessment-based. And they all have varying levels of challenge, so students can kind of pick and choose where they need to be. So the first one we're going to look at is the mathgames.com. And when you go to this link, you're going to get a series of problems, and they're going to look something like this right over here. Students just type in the answer to the question in this box and then click the answer button. If they get the question right, then they get this nice little affirmative, and the box at the bottom turns green. Down here is how students can track their progress. If they get the answer wrong, the question turns into something like this, where they no longer type in the answer, but instead get to choose buttons to push. If they still get the answer wrong, they're given a new question until they get it right. Once they get it right, they go on to the next question. And the bars look something like this at the bottom, the yellow indicating that you got it wrong the first time, right the second. From there, we can look at this more deeply. Students have the opportunity to self-monitor whether or not they're getting the questions right or wrong, and the goal bar at the bottom allows them to see their progress and how well they actually understand content. They are given instantaneous feedback, as you can see from the either try again that'll pop up or the super mark, so they know exactly what they're having trouble with and what they understand. Going back to the choice board, the next one we're going to look at is Quizlet. Quizlet is a very interesting tool. It can be used for any age, more or less, and it has several features that I really, really like. So the first one is the flashcards. You can just click back and forth, and it looks like a normal physical flashcard would. One side has a question on it, one side has an answer. Excuse me. It has a learn tool where you can practice answering questions specifically, and you have to get the questions right at least 2 times in a row to go from familiar to mastered right over here on this little tracking bar. Then you have write, where you actually have to write out the answer to the problem, so that's another way to kind of test your knowledge. And then you also have spell, which is less important for, telling time on a clock, but when it comes to spelling words or specific vocabulary terms, that could come in handy. And then you have the testing feature, where students can actually take a test on how well they know the content, and teachers could theoretically use this for an assessment if they wanted to. So I think Quizlet is a great tool. The students get many instantaneous feedback from the flashcards or from the learn feature or even the writing and spelling features. They can set goals about how well they want to do on that test, and the little bars on the side, specifically on that learn feature or that writing feature, kind of shows them how well they're doing and what they still need to practice. And of course, the scores give them the feedback they need. So next we can go on to just a simple worksheet. There are a number of worksheets out there. Worksheets aren't typically considered as fun by students, but it does give students an opportunity to self-monitor if they're given the answer key. If they're not given the answer key, then feedback and data collection can be kind of delayed because they don't get to see what they're getting right and wrong and fix that in real time. And it's kind of difficult to set goals just by working on a worksheet. But you can set goals about how well you want to do on a series of worksheets if that was where you wanted to go with it. Next, we have a video. The link to the video is right here. It's very long, but overall, the video looks something like this. So it's not interactive, but students can kind of follow along, and it'll give them a chance to pause and play the video as needed to answer the questions, and then the video will tell them whether or not they get the right answer. So at this point in the video, it's asking, what time is it now? The answer is 3 o'clock. Students can kind of answer to themselves, and then the video will tell them if they're right or wrong. There's not really a way to assess or give feedback on this specific tool, since there's no real written aspect. Teachers could have students write it down, but since they're given the answer right away, it might be counterproductive. But it does allow students to self-monitor how well they're doing and what it is they understand or don't understand about this particular concept. So next we have the practice with pictures. And this is an interesting tool. It's an analog clock that students can change the time on. So ideally, a teacher would give students a worksheet looking sort of thing where they have a number of times, and then they need to find that time on the clock, take a screenshot of the time, and then send it to the teacher for her or him to check. So that is an interesting tool that students can use, and you can kind of play around with the settings to show what you want to show or not show. Students can self-monitor. If they leave the time up, then they'll know whether or not their answers are correct. If they choose to take the time off, then obviously they wouldn't get that immediate feedback. Teachers would need to score and give feedback and collect the data, so how well they do isn't as instantaneous as some of the other resources. But students can set goals about how many questions they get right if they want to. So the next tool is called Stop the Clock. This one is a lot more instantaneous and very kid-friendly. It looks like a little game, as you see over here. There's a little bird that'll tell you whether or not your answer's right, and a voice will read what time you're supposed to do over here, and then this hand moves, and you have to hit the stop button when it reaches that time. It is a little lenient about how close you are to the time, just because it can be difficult to hit the stop button right at that exact moment, but overall it's a fairly decent tool. The little bird telling students whether or not they are getting the answers right or wrong allows the students to monitor how well they're doing and whether or not they understand. They can set goals for how many questions they've gotten right or wrong and what they want more help with. It doesn't really collect any data, but it does give them instantaneous feedback that they can use to kind of monitor themselves. So next we have Study.com. Study.com is a great assessment tool. They do have a 30-day free subscription, but after that you do have to pay for it, so that is kind of a drawback there. However, they have videos that explain the content you're teaching, and then they have tests and worksheets for students to work through. So again, it's not quite as fun, but it does allow students to self-monitor because they're getting feedback on those worksheets. They can set goals about how well they want to do on the worksheets and the quizzes, and since there are scores, they are getting feedback and can collect data about which type of problems they typically have trouble with and which ones they're okay on. Second, to last, we have Khan Academy, which is also a very popular tool. And Khan Academy is great because it has this assessment feature where it's a lot like many of the games. You see the clock, you put in the time, it'll tell you if you get it right or wrong, and it keeps track on this little bar down here. But it's also very great because if you aren't understanding the content, it provides a video or step-by-step instructions. So students can self-monitor by seeing whether or not they're getting specific content right or wrong in real time. They can set goals using that little bar at the right-hand corner about how well they're doing, and they can say, I want to get 3 right in a row, and set that goal for themselves. It collects data through that same bar. They're seeing how many they're getting right or wrong, and can kind of decide which ones they're are proving to be more challenging for them, and they're getting feedback about that. Finally, we have the What Time Is It game, which is just a game where students get an audio clip asking for a specific time, and then they have to pick out the clock that has that time on it. If they're right, then this little cat will, go, good job. And if they're wrong, then they get the opportunity to try again or ask the little cat for help. Again, this is great because it helps students to self-monitor whether they're getting things right or wrong. They can set goals for how many they want to get right in a row. It doesn't keep track of which ones they're getting right or wrong or how many. But the game does give instantaneous feedback that can allow students to make corrections in real time. So all of these are great tools that allow students a variety of assessment and exploration with this particular concept, and they're all kind of at a variety of understanding levels. So students who understand this really well can do some of the harder, test quizzes. Students who are having more difficulty with this can do some of the simpler games until they build their understanding. But that's it. Thank you.